Welcome to Don't Skip, a show that seeks to concisely highlight games that we feel could stand to get a little more attention. The show intends to create a space for things that would likely get swallowed by bigger titles, or busy seasons, or for games that weren't fully appreciated in their time. Instead of a comprehensive overview, Don't Skip focuses on what makes a game special. That's not to say games featured on the show are flawless or free from criticism, but we can give an enthusiastic recommendation in spite of those shortcomings. Don't Skip is also intended to be flexible. One episode may be about a relatively forgotten game from the past, and the next may be about a more recent release. Time travel is not a new concept in video games. Countless games in a wide variety of genres have used the idea, but few apply it as thoroughly as Radiant Historia. You bounce between timelines for the story's duration, with decisions and events in one timeline having a direct effect on others, making the Save the World premise more engaging than it would be on its own. Underpinning the unconventional story structure is a highly strategic battle system and focuses on playing with turn sequencing and manipulating the positions of enemies. On top of it all, what makes the perfect Chronology 3DS remake especially worth commending is how much it adds to the base game that first came out in North America in 2011. There are significant additions bolstering the presentation, story, and gameplay that allow the remake to actually feel like a consequential upgrade. Of all the positive things in Radiant Historia Perfect Chronology, the combat is often the most deserving of praise. Enemies are placed on a grid, and their positions on that grid are highly important. Certain skills allow you to move an enemy from one spot on the grid to another, and you acquire more of these skills throughout the game. By moving several enemies onto the same space, you can damage all of them at once with a single attack. Since so many battles include a healthy number of targets, the only efficient way to fight is to bunch them all up, and then rain down a more concentrated stream of damage. To do that requires lining up character turns correctly. Each character can do this by using the change command, switching spots in the combat turn order with an enemy or another party member. Oftentimes it's advantageous to swap things so an enemy gets to act before you do, but by switching, you stack character turns back to back, leading to a higher combo and therefore greater overall damage. All of these individual mechanics add up to a lot of thinking during battles. While it's possible to ignore the finer aspects and brute force your way through standard encounters on the normal difficulty, doing so comes at a high cost. Ignoring efficiency means taking more damage than you need to or expending MP. Money doesn't come easy in Radiant Historia, and considering the prices of new equipment, shelling out for healing items or in-visits may not be the most effective use of your funds. It's not that things are so prohibitively expensive they can't be utilized, but Radiant Historia seems designed to create moments when you'll feel the pinch.
How about this?
In comparison to countless other JRPGs, where battles eventually become more of a gritted teeth obligation rather than an exercise of any real consequence, it's very appreciated that Radiant Historia has the gall to push back as much as it does. That's not even including boss encounters, which can sometimes demand the most thorough planning. You may find yourself obliterated during one attempt, only to completely destroy the roadblock with a new strategy. Such satisfaction carries through to the very end of the story. Characterizing Radiant Historia as a difficult game may not be wholly accurate, but it is at the very least one that's willing to make players feel anxious about more than just stats, instead putting a greater emphasis on understanding the fundamentals of its combat. The continually branching nature of the time-traveling story encourages a playful attitude from the player. There are plenty of times where you'll be forced to make decisions for difficult situations. The wrong choice can often mean dire consequences, such as the death of a character or the downfall of an entire operation. These negative outcomes are played as short, bad endings, but thankfully you can just zip back in time to fix the mistake. Since the consequence for screwing up is so light, it's actually interesting to satiate your curiosity and let the wrong choice play out. Also surprising is how developed these bad endings are, considering the number of them. There's a decent amount of dialogue for what could have been essentially throwaway scenes, making the impulse to witness it all that much stronger. Another notable quality is how much meat there is to side quests in general. Not only do you have to regularly travel between different timelines in order to get things done, but side quests are used to flesh out the finer details of the world and give ancillary characters a chance to shine. The game's structure as a whole seems to adopt a philosophy that you get out of it what you put in, assuring that those who do want to explore and toy with the game will be rewarded. Anytime a game labels itself a remake, it's unclear just how much will actually change or improve, but Perfect Chronology is one of the better recent examples. There are a number of relatively minor additions such as new character portraits, an anime intro, and added art during specific cutscenes. Other elements, such as the inclusion of voiceover for most major characters, adds a substantial amount to the game's presentation. Radiant Historia is a game about war and a decaying land, so to actually hear emotions like desperation, elation, or anger through the voice work gives the story more punch.
Now, let me guess. You just so happen to have a relic left behind by the Lost Empire.
There are worthwhile changes to the gameplay as well. Support attacks allow characters who aren't in your active party to chip in. Although it may not sound like much, it ends up being surprisingly useful. Quite often, support attacks will provide the last bit of damage needed to take down a monster. They can offer buffs to the party, and they even allow you to do things like steal items. It's always tempting to find a party setup you like and stick with it because it can be a pain to keep every character around a similar level. Perfect Chronology allows you to do so with a little less guilt, since everyone can contribute in a meaningful way. There's also the Vault of Time, an added dungeon where you can grind a new currency for weapons, items, and accessories. It's another addition that's more useful than it sounds because the currency is fairly easy to get, providing another avenue for upgrading equipment. Every bit helps when money is so valuable in the rest of the game. By far the biggest inclusion in Perfect Chronology is an added timeline and character named Nemesia. In this timeline, you'll explore what-if situations where you'll run into familiar characters and situations, but under different circumstances. Nemesia herself is quirky and chipper, making her an entertaining addition to the cast. There are two ways to experience the new story elements, either by having them integrated into the main narrative or saving them until after the story is finished. Regardless of which path you take, there's a sizable amount to do. Considering Radiant Historia didn't exactly have the biggest audience when it first came out, it would have been understandable if Perfect Chronology had been little more than a slightly tweaked re-release with the hopes of grabbing people who missed it the first time. The fact that its additions are so significant is all the more reason to give it a chance. Yet these changes only support what already makes Radiant Historia so great, particularly its smart battle system and atypical structure. We've been a little spoiled with quality JRPGs in the last couple of years, but Radiant Historia deserves recognition, even in an increasingly crowded space.
It was at that point that the course of history was determined.